you can make 2 attacks with your action and cleave into 2 others. That's 4 attacks. You action surge again, that's 8 attacks at level 5. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Wisdom Save podcast. I am your host and Dungeon Master Sam, and today we're diving into the deep end on the new weapon mastery system found in the new 2024 Player's Handbook coming out this September. Stay tuned. Okay, everyone, this is huge news. I mean, absolutely huge news. And to be fair, it's now August at the time of posting this. I'm recording this back in July, so this is still pretty fresh on my mind. So I'm sorry this is late. It's just how it has to happen. Guys, they've added a new weapon mastery system into the new core rulebooks coming out this September. What are those exactly? Wow. I literally cannot, I can't describe to you guys how excited I am for this new feature. I think this is going to add some very much needed boost to martials across the board. There's always been this massive discrepancy between martial classes and spellcasters. Because sure, a level 20 fighter can attack 5-6 times. More than that with action surge. It's fine. It's great. Fighters go bonk. But a wizard can still cast Wish. Like a wizard can still say, I wish you away. They can cast Simulacrum. They can cast Meteor Swarm. Like, there's so many amazing spells at high level, even low level. Like, talk about Polymorph being a 4th level spell, busted. Haste being a 3rd level spell, busted. Okay, I can keep talking about that forever. That spellcasters quickly outpace martials, especially in the mid to late game. It's really easy, wizard, classic, dies of 1d4, whatever damage. Spellcasters tend to be really squishy and not as useful at low levels. Thinking of warlocks only get 1 level until level 3 or 4, you get 1 spell slot. This is going to hopefully change the game dramatically so that martials feel less, or actually feel more powerful towards the end of the campaign than they do now. So let's dive deep into this because I'm super excited. So I'm pulling up on my phone here. All this information is coming from the D&D Beyond website and coming from their posts. So I will link to this post in the comment section, video description, show notes, wherever you're consuming this. It'll be down in the description for you to kind of follow along. So if you're not driving and you're not in your car, you're not doing things dangerous, I encourage you, take out your phone, follow along, and let's walk through this. So let's talk about this. Okay, so it says your guide to weapon mastery in the 2024 Player's Handbook by Mike. Hi, Mike. We're going to see a lot of Mike. Mike's written a lot of these. Okay, let's just cover this briefly. The fighter uses their maul to knock down their opponent. The rogue dances around with their rapier to find their foe's weak point. And the barbarian swings a great axe through 2 enemies with a single blow. Every character in D&D has a unique flair that they bring to combat. And that's reflected in the new weapon mastery feature in the 2024 Player's Handbook. Okay, so I'm going to pause there. There's some semantic changes I think that I need to get straight in my head. They're calling it officially the new weapon mastery feature, not a new weapon mastery system. I think that's important. Look at the difference between the wordings of system and feature. A system tends to feel more involved. A crafting system has all of these facets and intricacies, and it's a bit more complicated than a feature. This is just a feature, which is great. I think adding a new system into the game might be a little complicated since they are adding a new crafting system later on this year. I think this is great. So let's just move forward with the weapon mastery feature. Okay. They talk about the pre-order. We covered that already. Okay, what is weapon mastery? Weapon mastery is a class feature, right there. Class feature, not a systems. So it's something you're going to get in your class description. It is shared between some martial classes that reflect their specialization with certain types of weapons. Each weapon in the equipment section of the 2024 Player's Handbook lists a mastery property in addition to the weapon's regular properties. If the weapon meets the requirements in your class's weapon mastery feature, that's a mouthful, you can learn its mastery property and use it in combat. Okay, so basically what there is a list of weapons. And each weapon has its own unique mastery point. So I don't know if you've ever played Baldur's Gate 3, but it's similar to that. So in Baldur's Gate 3, each weapon had these kind of sub-abilities that you could use. So for example, the quarterstaff had something called Topple. Anyway, you could use this ability and make an attack. It was like a 1d4 for the quarterstaff. And you have a chance to knock someone prone if they fail a saving throw. That's the same vibe here. Each weapon they each have these new unique abilities that you can add on to an attack. Some of them are every time you attack. Some are on a hit. Some say on a miss. So there's different triggers for each of these properties, but that is the gist of what we're going for. So let's keep going. But learning a mastery property isn't permanent. If you stumble across a shiny new +1 longsword and want to learn its mastery property instead, don't worry. Oh, thanks, Mike. During a long rest, you can practice weapon drills and swap out one of your weapon choices at the end of the rest. Okay, so this is actually really cool. And this is kind of why I bring up the spell casting, kind of compare and contrast each one of them. Marshals will have, each martial class will have a certain number of weapons they can attune to in terms of the mastery system or mastery feature. Meaning a fighter might only be able to use 3 or 4 weapons and count those towards their mastery points and be able to use them. Meaning, so if they have 5, 6, 7, 8 weapons, but they can only use, a handful of those at a time. On a long rest, they can swap out. They can train with them. So, roleplay wise, yeah, you're going to train with them, but you just, on a long rest, switch out which ones you're using. So that means you can go into the next adventuring day having prepared the day before. So in the same way that wizards have to go through their spell book and all prepared casters have to go through their spells and prepare spells for that next day, marshals will have to do something similar with all these abilities, which I think is really cool. It adds a lot of new dynamics to the game and really kind of gives more strategy to marshals. And we'll talk a lot more about marshals later because the buffs that they made to the fighter and to the barbarian and the paladin are great. If you've seen any of my TikToks, you know that I'm a big fan of a lot of these changes. Handful of them we have some questions about, and we'll talk more about that. And I'll even invite some of my friends on this podcast, and we'll kind of go through that together, which I'm excited for. But let's keep going. So the number of mastery properties you can learn is specified in your class's version of the weapon mastery feature, right? So each class will get their own version of this feature. Rogues, rangers, and paladins can only access 2 mastery points at a time. Mastery points, mastery properties at a time. Whereas barbarians and fighters start with 2 and 3 respectively, and eventually gain more mastery properties as detailed in their features table. So exactly what we talked about. So the rogue only starts out with 2, a dagger and a rapier, which is really all you'll probably need. But let's say you want to use a scimitar, because a scimitar has a different mastery property than a rapier, even though they both do. Actually, I think the scimitar. Let me look this up. A scimitar does a 1d6, does 1d6 damage. Short sword does 1d6 damage. Rapier does 1d8. I had to remember myself of that. So, for example, you can also as a rogue use a short sword, or as a monk use a short sword. Now the short sword and the scimitar are different because their master properties give you different extra abilities you can do when you make an attack with that weapon. That's great. Let's keep going. So, at level 1, barbarians, fighters, paladins, rangers, and rogues get access to mastery properties for certain types of weapons as listed below. So, we're just going to go through this real quick. Barbarians, you get simple and martial melee weapons. Great. Fighter, simple and martial weapons. All of them, which makes sense. Paladins is based on your weapon proficiencies, simple and martial. Ranger, based on weapon proficiencies, again, simple and martial. Rogue, based on your weapon proficiencies, simple and martial weapons with the light or finesse properties. And they made changes to the light, and we'll get. Trust me, there's so many changes, guys. This is why this video is coming to you so much sooner than all the other ones, because every other class builds on these features. It's kind of insane. So that's why we're covering this first. So mastering weapon mastery. Some subclasses allow you to access more mastery properties. For example, the Soul Knife Rogue can use the Vex mastery property, Vex, V-E-X, property with their psychic blades, with their side blades. Super cool. And it doesn't count towards their learned weapon mastery limit. So there's a lot of these things where they kind of hide these weapons that you get access to as a soul knife, as a way of the ancestry of barbarian. So a lot of these other subclasses give you access to them, and they don't count against the ones you have already. That sound familiar? It sounds exactly like spells, in my opinion. I'm a wizard through and through. I love playing wizards. And there's so many times when you choose a class and choose a subclass, you get access to certain spells, and they don't count against the number of spells you can have prepared or that kind of thing. Same deal here. We'll see a lot of those as we cover every single class and subclass. Okay, that's great, but how do we use these weapon mastery properties? If you're wielding a weapon and have learned its mastery property, you'll be able to use that mastery property every turn when you make an attack with that weapon. Okay, let's just pause there because I think that is huge. I never thought they were going to do this. I assumed it was going to be just like Baldur's Gate 3 where I have this cool great axe. I can cleave with it one time. That's it. One time per short rest. And that makes sense if you really think about it like spells, because spells are a resource that we expend and we get back on long rests, or if you're a warlock on a short rest. But the level of access spellcasters have to spells and the variety of spells that they have, including warlocks, is so much bigger than the pool of properties that they're giving. So I'm super glad that you can trigger this property with every single attack. Yeah, every attack on your turn. So if you have multiple attacks, you can apply that property every single attack. It's busted. There's a property we'll get to that allows you to push someone. If I have that, I can push him multiple times. I'm thinking about the monk, just like kicking and punching and just shoving people back and dancing that. It's going to be so much fun. Let's keep going. Different mastery properties have different triggers. For example, Cleave requires you to hit a creature with a melee attack roll, while Graze triggers when you miss a creature with an attack roll. So just like what we talked about before, each one of these have different triggers. And we'll get to all of these again as we keep going. So unlike some abilities, there's no limit to how many times weapon mastery can be used per short or long rest. So go nuts. Thanks, Mike. Mike's great. Again, I talked about this before, guys. The art in this book is going to be amazing. Please go purchase your copy from your local game store, because also the alternative art is amazing. That's what I'll be getting. I'm going to go down to Pasadena when it comes out and pick up my copy. Okay. So if you want to hang out, September 17th, meet me at Odyssey Games. I'll be down there in line for my copy. Okay, let's keep going. Mastery property overview. Okay, now we're going to get into the meat of things. Now we're really going to talk about what actually are these weapon properties. We've spent the last 15 minutes just talking about general talk about what they are and how to use them. Let's dive deep into what they are specifically. Oh, I'm so excited. So let's start with Cleave. Oh, this art's great. Cleave. They give the example of a great axe. So the great axe will have Cleave. And I think if you go in the one of the UA that this was introduced in, it did give you a table of all the weapons and their mastery properties. I don't know. Again, it's UA, so it's not official in the sense of it's done. So things might change when the book's released, but that's a good list to kind of pick from if you want to start playing with those now in your game. So let's talk about our first property called Cleave. So Cleave is found on the great axe, and plenty of other ones, but the example they give here is the great axe. Let's go ahead and read. If you'll be wading into the thick of battle, you'll want to consider grabbing a weapon with the Cleave property. These heavy weapons can slash through opponents. If you hit a creature with a melee weapon attack, you can make a second attack against a creature within 5 feet that is also within your reach. Okay, let's just stop there. That is amazing. I think this is going to be a super underrated ability initially, because we have this homebrew property called Cleave, and we'll get to that in a second. I know there's conflict of interest here, but let's hang on to that. This doesn't require this. You can make that second attack as a part of your action. Okay? Per attack. Let that sink in for a second. You can make a second attack as a part of your attack action per attack. Fighters, 5th level, you get extra attack. You have a cleaved weapon. You can make 2 attacks with your action and cleave into 2 others. That's 4 attacks. You action surge again. That's 8 attacks at level 5. Now, yeah, you're not adding your ability modifier to it at all, but that's okay. You're still going to do massive damage, and the part of your main action leaves your bonus action available. Okay, I'm looking at... it'd be interesting to see how Rangers using this property or Warlock using this property with Hunter's Mark or Hex, that damage on Hex does affect that. So it'll be super interesting because there's a feat you can take. Oh my gosh, I'm just brainstorming this. Okay, we're gonna have to do a character build at some point when the book comes out. If you take, because they're gonna have a weapon mastery initiate, and you have a fighter initiate, all that kind of stuff. So as a Warlock, if you wanted to, you can make a pact weapon. Oh my gosh, pact weapon with Hex, it has the cleave property. If you can, oh my gosh, there are possibilities are endless. That stacks those extra d6s. I can't. We have to move on because that is just gonna be busted. Let's keep reading. Make a second attack against a creature within 5 feet of you that is also within your reach, right? So within 5 feet of your opponent and within your reach. So that's why a halberd with a weapon with reach is great. And if you're a bugbear that has extra reach, that's actually 15 feet. Polearm Master, I'm thinking about this, and it's going to be great. This is excellent in combination with the halberd that has reach. We just said that, and cleave, allowing you to cleave into enemies at extended range. I think this is my favorite. And we'll have to see because, like I said, we have this kind of homebrew rule called cleave that we use at our table that I think a lot of other tables use, that when you make an attack against an enemy and that attack brings them to 0 hit points, and if you still have leftover damage on your damage die that hasn't been applied, that carries over to the next guy. We'll have to see how that plays out. I think what we're going to do is, personally, I'm going to remove that homebrew rule, and we're going to stick with this because, one, this is in the official content, and I want to see how it plays out in play, in actual play with very few added rules. We're going to go as vanilla as we can with this new rule book. So we'll have to see how that goes. Well, let's move on. We have a lot more to cover. Graze is the next one. The example they give is the greatsword. Graze is an excellent way to increase the consistency of your weapon damage. If you miss a creature with your weapon, you deal damage equal to the ability modifier you use to make that roll. This pairs well with abilities that allow you to make lots of attacks, like Divider's extra attack features or the Polearm Master or Sentinel feats. It just goes to show that when a weapon is big enough, you really don't need to aim when you're swinging. And I love this. This is basically, think of like the barbarian, you're raging, and you're swinging this greatsword, just big, massive swings. Even if you miss, you're still going to do damage, which I think is amazing. And it makes sense that it's the ability modifier, so your strength modifier, unless you're somehow able to use your dexterity or charisma if you're a special rogue or warlock. But I think that's going to be huge. And it's going to make fighters and barbarians feel better. I think because it really sucks when you make an attack and it doesn't hit. I think this is going to aim to solve a lot of those issues. I think it's, like I said, this isn't a silver bullet to solve all those issues, but I do think this is going to be so much better. Hey there, adventurers. Need some new dice to roll those critical hits or avoid those devastating fails? Look no further than our friends at Easy Roller Dice. They've got a fantastic selection of high-quality dice sets, perfect for any tabletop game. Whether you're a seasoned dungeon master or just starting out with your first campaign, Easy Roller Dice has everything you need to bring your game to the next level. From stunning metal dice to beautifully crafted resin sets, there's truly something for everyone. And here's the best part. We've teamed up with Easy Roller Dice to give you an exclusive discount. Just use the code WisdomSavePodcast at checkout and you'll get 20% off your entire order. It is a one-time use code, so make sure you grab those dice you've been eyeing. Plus, by using our code, you're not only saving money, but you're also supporting us at the podcast. We get a kickback from every purchase, which helps us continue bringing you awesome content and epic adventures. So don't miss out. Head over to Easy Roller Dice, pick out your favorite dice, and use code WisdomSavePodcast at checkout for 20% off. Trust me, your dice bag will thank you. So Graze allows you to make an attack, and if you miss, and there's a trigger, if you miss, you deal damage equal to the modifier you used. So we'll have to see if you have a plus 11 to hit, is that the plus 11, or is it the plus extra on the damage? That's probably the damage. So if you have a plus 4 in strength, you're gonna do 4 damage. So I mean, it's something. We'll have to see, because that makes sense. We'll have to see how that plays out in actual play, especially when the FAQs start coming through and we can kind of clarify some of these questions with the D&D team. All right, let's keep going. Nick. All right, Mike, writing about Nick. Nick is the next weapon property. The example they give is a dagger. To explain the Nick property, we should briefly cover that being able to attack twice while dual-wielding light weapon properties has subtly changed in the 2024 Player's Handbook. This is great. Instead of being covered under melee attacks, the rules for dual-wielding light weapon properties are covered under the light weapon property. I like this a lot. I think this is what we talked about before. They're basically taking a lot of these rules that were kind of hidden in different places, and they're bringing them into a single place, which I think is going to be great. It brings a lot of clarity to this. So let's go ahead and keep reading. It still functions the same way, right? So when you make an attack with a weapon that has the light property, you can use a bonus action to make one attack with a different light weapon that you're wielding. That's how that worked before. If I'm dual wielding 2 daggers, they both have the light weapon property, I can make one attack in my main hand, roll my dice, add my modifier, then I make a second attack, my offhand, just with the weapon damage die, no modifier. That's how that worked in 2014, up until now. If that weapon has the Nick mastery property, it allows you to make the additional attack you receive from wielding the 2 light weapon properties as a part of the initial action. So basically, you're moving this backhand attack from your bonus action into the main action that you're doing, which leaves your bonus action free. Again, great for any bonus action shenanigans like Hex or Hunter's Mark or anything else you can do in your bonus action. I think that's a huge change. It really frees up that action economy. While it may not pump your damage, this frees up your bonus action, like I said, to use class or species abilities such as Rogue's Cunning Action, while still gaining an additional attack in. So it's the same way, right? It's attack, make a second attack, don't add the modifier on the second attack, but now your bonus action is freed up. Cunning Action, like I said, adding extra d6s through Hunter's Mark or Hex, if you have that as an ability. I think this is overall going to be such a bigger change and allows you to play more creatively and allows you more options in your combat, which I think is great. All right, let's move on to push. So push, they give the example of the Great Club. Sometimes giving an enemy a simple shove off a cliff or into a pit of lava is all you need to win otherwise a tough encounter. The push mastery property allows you to launch a creature you hit 10 feet straight away from you without a save. So if I have a Great Club and I just boink, bop you, and I hit, I can move you 10 feet. Is it say 10 feet or is it up to 10 feet? 10 feet. So you don't get to choose how far away. They just move to 10 feet. No save whatsoever. That's great. And this stacks with other abilities they talk about, and we'll talk about this more when we get to the Barbarian. The Barbarian has a lot of kind of built-in weapon mastery in their class abilities that lets them push people away. So does the Monk. This push property stacks with that. So that means you can push the people 20 feet away. And I think that is awesome for one, style, like roleplay wise, as a big, massive barbarian swinging this club, you're going to knock people back. In real life, that would happen. I'm a small dude. If a big guy took a big club at me, I would be laid out on the floor behind me. So this makes sense. I love the flavor for it. I'm thinking monks using their hands and just, it's gonna be great. I really just can't wait to start playing this, honestly. I've been reading this and I just want to play. Not only just great when combined with environmental hazards, it's also great for escaping opportunity attacks. If you or a less tanky party member are being harassed by an enemy, you can push the enemy 10 feet away, allowing you to create much needed space between you and the enemy. So that's great. As a wizard, if someone's up against me, I would love my barbarian friend to come and push them. Otherwise, if you take the shove action, it's a contested strength check, right? And wizards have notoriously horrible strength. Usually a -1. I mean, come on, let's be real. So this is going to be great. And also, for escaping opportunity attacks for big guys who don't have the cunning action, the bonus action, get out of there. Hit them and move them. And then you have an opportunity to either move up to them, attack again, move them again, and then even then, you can still walk away if you have extra movement. So I think that's going to be great. Keep in mind, you can only push enemies large or smaller, so you don't get to so you don't getting stuck next to an adult. So they basically you can't shove an adult black dragon, which makes sense. That makes sense. I would probably homebrew that it's your size or smaller. I feel like that makes more sense to me. If you're a small dude, I'm just picturing a fairy with a great club. For a fairy barbarian with a great club, swinging and just moving these large orcs, pushing them back. I don't know, I think it's kind of funny. I'm going to have to create that character at some point. Okay, let's move on. Sap, S-A-P, Sap. The example they gave is the mace, the weapon of choice, usually by clerics. So I'm excited. If your job is to distract the enemy for long enough to let your blaster caster friend deal damage, Sap is a solid choice. When you hit an enemy with an attack, this weapon mastery property inflicts disadvantage on your target's next attack roll before the start of your next turn. So for heavily armored tanky builds, your enemies will be so focused on trying to take you out, they won't even see the fireball coming. And I think this is great. So, and they talk about this in their YouTube video, in the video that D&D had posted over on their channel. Specifically that they had the cleric in mind for this, because the cleric already plays such a great support role, and is already such a tanky character, usually, that going around imposing disadvantage on everyone's attack rolls is huge, and it adds a whole extra layer to support for the cleric. But again, anyone can take, as long as you're proficient with the weapon, and you can take that weapon mastery property. Fighters, you get this too. Barbarians, you get this too. As long it's awesome. I'm so excited. I think these are great. Let's move on to slow. Slow is one of my favorites, actually. The example they give is the light crossbow. I read somewhere else that also the longbow has a slow feature as well. This mastery property is excellent for fast builds that like to flit across the battlefield. When you hit a creature and deal damage, you can reduce its speed by 10 feet until the start of your next turn. This combos excellently with the light crossbow, allowing you to take shots, damage your opponent, and then move just out of range to reduce their speed. Rinse and repeat until they look like a pincushion. I love this. This is going to be great for, like I said, for archers, for any kind of dex-based fighters, or for rangers. This is awesome. It's important to note that a creature's speed can't be reduced by more than 10 feet with this property, so don't expect to stand still, hit your enemy 3 times, and not get caught. I like that. I do wish it could stack. There's a lot of because they mentioned the other abilities that we talked about. Those can stack, but this weapon mastery property doesn't stack on itself, which is kind of a bummer. But hey, you're still reducing their speed by 10 feet. So if they have a speed of 30, 25, they're like it's going to be better. And I love the flavor of this too. Because we're gonna take a pause for a quick story time. One of my first, my very first campaign, my very first character was a fighter. I was an archer, and I remember my very first encounter. I hid in the corner, taking pop shots, and I looked at this guy who was harassing my party member, and I said, "DM, I want to shoot him in the foot. I want to pin him to the ground so he can't move." I didn't know to play D&D. I didn't know how any of these rules worked. And my DM was like, "Well, you can't really do that." And so what he had me do is, call shots, roll with disadvantage, and that's what we did. And I won. I think I got like a nat 20 or something. So he's like, "Okay, yeah, sure, he's pinned." That's technically not in the rules. Technically, you just do damage. But because it was a cool narrative moment, and I felt cool as a player, he allowed that to happen. This is going to facilitate more of that. Of, hey, I want to shoot him in the foot. I'm going to slow him down. And now I have an actual mechanic that allows me to do that. It's not a rule of cool anymore. It's not an DM kind of. It's part of the rules. Something that players are allowed to do, which is going to it's just going to allow players to, and again, marshals, to be more creative on how they approach combat, so that they're not just swinging and just, I stay next to the guy and I swing. These properties are going to add more dynamic movement to a combat encounter, and I just love that. Okay, end of story time. Let's move on. Topple, we talked about this before. The example they gave is the maul. I also know the quarterstaff has this topple property. This mastery property is for all those builds that love to wail on their enemies with multiple melee attacks. When you hit a creature, you can force it to make a Constitution saving throw or fall prone. The DC for this is 8+ the ability modifier you use to make the attack plus your proficiency bonus. So it's a typical calculation there. So a level 5 fighter with a maul could knock down their opponent prone with their first attack. Then use their second attack and action surge to make multiple attacks with advantage. So just imagine you're able to topple them and then you just wail them on them while they're on the ground. That's awesome. Especially for a champion fighter at higher levels, when you have multiple attacks and your crit chances are higher, you're just going to be critting on these guys all day long. Okay, let's move on with our last weapon mastery property, Vex. The example they give us the short sword. Having a weapon with the Vex property feels like a superior swordsman dancing around their opponent, striking at openings until the battle is won. When you hit a creature, that's the trigger. When you hit a creature and deal damage, this weapon mastery property gives you advantage on your next attack roll before the end of your next turn. This is an excellent way for rogues to all but guarantee sneak attack on their next turn. So this is huge. This is going to be amazing for, and I think it's also on rapiers, which would make sense, right? Because rogues, here's what you're using. You hit, and it grants you advantage on the next one. That's automatic sneak attack. As long as you don't already have a disadvantage from another source. So you're pretty much always going to get your sneak attack. It will be interesting to see, though, how it affects some of the rogue subclasses. So, for example, we have the swashbuckler rogue, and their whole shtick is kind of, they give like another way to get advantage, right, by calling someone out one-on-one. And I hope this doesn't take away from that identity, and it kind of becomes, well, I get it because I get advantage because I have the rapier, and we'll have to see. I don't think the swashbuckler is even going to be in this new player's handbook, so maybe within the revised version they might tweak that a little bit. But if you wanted to play a swashbuckler with the new rules, you might find this kind of like traffic jam in ability. So you're not going to be using that ability that much. But we'll have to wait and see. And that's it, guys. That's it for the weapon masteries. I think, again, this is going to be an awesome new addition to the game, allowing our martials friends to have way more options in combat, where you're basically now having to prepare spells, the way I think about it, prepare for the next adventuring day, especially for fighters who have a lot more weapons in their arsenal, literally. This also gives great flavor for weapons that have traditionally had the same damage die and the same properties, like a scimitar and a short sword. Why would you take one or the other outside of flavor? Mechanically, they had no identity. They were kind of the same thing. So we didn't think about it outside of roleplay. Now they do. Now each weapon has their own unique property. And according to the UA document, there's no two weapons that have the same damage die that also have the same weapon mastery property. I think that's intentional. I think they want to make each weapon feel different. And I absolutely love that. All right, guys. Well, that is all for today. If you found any value at all on this podcast, we would absolutely love it if you guys would just hang out with us. Hit the follow button, like us, download all those kind of things. You guys know what to do. We post, again, every Friday. We have our Critical Conversations every Friday at 6 a.m. And then we do our Monster of the Week every Tuesday morning at 6 a.m. as well. And that's going to be awesome. That's where we have custom monsters that we build out based on monsters we look at the monster manual. So I'm really excited. So anyway, stay tuned for that. I'm so excited. And I can't wait to see you guys next week. We'll see you.